There are a lot of words I could use to describe Modern Warfare 3's campaign. Good is not one of them, but neither is it terrible. It's just kind of meh. One might wonder what decisions were made by the developers to lead us to this point. But honestly, I don't think we can blame the developers given they had to throw together this campaign in just over a year's time. Do you think Activision's management even cares that they forced their dev teams to grind out and rush out games which could be objectively better in every measurable way?
We are deeply sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry.
So, let's start by covering two things, which I want to make clear from the get-go. The first is this. I'm not going to pretend that Modern Warfare 3's campaign isn't a big elephant in the room when it comes to the mission structure and the length of the game itself. This 2023 Modern Warfare 3 campaign was seemingly being developed as a smaller DLC expansion for 2022's Modern Warfare 2, before anything could go awry. Then, out of no logical place or sane, rational mental processing, the decision was made to force said DLC into a content bundle and package it all together to call it a new game. So yeah, Activision really has the best shot at winning the Worst Development Wingman Ever award. Whatever form it took, or whatever it is now, one thing is for certain. Modern Warfare 3's campaign has been the subject of a lot of ridicule and basically the joke of the industry since it launched. So much so that the Game Awards opening bit literally went like this.
My speech was actually longer than this year's Call of Duty campaign.
People feel the campaign was a letdown, and they don't mind poking fun at it, whether they are part of an opening act of an award show or not. The second thing I want to state is the following. I do not intend to ask you, or even expect anyone watching this video, to change their mind on how they feel about the game, good or bad. My goal is to show what I think is good, what I think is bad, what I think worked given the constraints of what they were designing with the time the devs were given to make the game, and finally, why I think these things weren't received well by the fanbase. Now, one might say something like, well, it's because they were lazy and the game just sucks, man, jeez, get over it. One could say that for sure. I just want people to at least hear me out before instantly evaluating this game as a total loss. Because I still think, despite all of this game's flaws, there's still some fun to be had in the campaign, even with a ridiculous narrative that is stitched together with the likes of duct tape and bubblegum. So let's jump right in and figure out why this year's Call of Duty campaign has become so controversial. Modern Warfare 3 contains 14 missions, and 2 of those are objectively cutscene missions. Some would argue, subjectively, that there are many filler missions, but I leave that open to your interpretation. The missions are as follows. Operation 627, Precious Cargo, Reactor, Payload, Deep Cover, Passenger, Crash Site, Flashpoint, Oligarch, High Rise, Frozen Tundra, Gorodom, Danger Close, and Trojan Horse. Out of these missions, there are some of what I would call traditional linear COD missions, while others are labeled open combat missions, and 2 are the aforementioned cutscene missions. The breakdown is as follows. The linear COD missions are Operation 627, Payload, Flashpoint, Frozen Tundra, Danger Close, and Trojan Horse. The open combat missions are Precious Cargo, Reactor, Crash Site, Oligarch, High Rise, Gorodom. The cutscene missions are Deep Cover and Passenger. As the crow flies, these missions will take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to complete based off my projections for how most are playing through the game and from a decent sampling of people mentioning their completion times on social media. It took me somewhere between 6 to 8 hours to complete, as I didn't really rush my time through the open combat portions of the game, so I'll settle for a more modest estimate of 6 to 7 hours. We'll start by looking at the opening mission of the game, Operation 627. Which is an obvious callback to Prisoner 627 from Modern Warfare 2's Gulag mission. The level seems to be drawing the inspiration from Black Ops 1's Prison Break mission and the Gulag from 2009's MW2. These two inspirations blend really well together. The level opens with a stealthy approach from the water and has the player ascending over the wall of the Gulag. Once inside the wall, the player must make their way to the interior in order to extract a prisoner. The section where you rappel downstairs, past multiple floors, and take out guards in the dark with night vision was a pretty cool twist on the original design from 2009. Now, in a nice little turn of events, the prisoner is not priced this time. but instead it's Makarov himself. Once Makarov is free, all Hades breaks loose. In the chaos of the prison riot, the player must escort Makarov to safety and escape. On the whole, it's a pretty cool start to the game, and a nice twist on a throwback to the good times of yesteryear. I don't really have any complaints or criticisms of this opening mission, as it's pretty standard Call of Duty flair. This particular level is probably my second favorite of the game. The second mission serves as the game's introduction to the open combat mission design. The entire level sort of acts as a tutorial for players to be introduced to the concepts of maneuvering around an open-ended level with objectives and no set way to go about doing things. As this is a glorified tutorial, the mission's goal is effectively to locate some cargo manifest information for missiles and get the heck out of there. While the level design isn't amazing, and this is likely one of the worst missions you'll have to traverse through, I won't waste much time on this level other than to say, it's not the worst, however it's not good either. It's just kind of here. That brings us to Reactor, the game's second open combat mission. This is when the improvements on the open-ended levels start to take center stage, as the arena to move around in here is much more spacious and full of different and exciting engagement opportunities, something akin to a mail-order bride webpage. I really came to appreciate the ability to use armaments, which are basically kill streaks in the campaign. I love the variety they represent and the opportunities for some chaos that they afford when used at the right time. It's great fun. The goal of Reactor is to determine what the Konni forces are doing at a nuclear site in northern Urzikstan. While the base element driving the plot here is effectively chemical weapons, another returning Call of Duty plot point, I thought the map's variety of engagements made this a fun area to combat threats and explore around. It's fine, but not great. This is a largely stealth-based mission before the player heads down to the bunker for the second half of the mission. I thought that this was one of the more interesting choices in terms of design. The level is split into two parts. Part 1 is the ground level and Part 2 is the underground level. Up top, where you start the level, is all about picking off the threats one by one. The player approaches from a hill vantage point and has a choice to either head left or head to the right and find a way inside without raising the alarm. I took the left path and snuck around from the broken outer wall while taking out enemies in each stretch of the path. This is certainly not going to go down as one of the more iconic missions in COD history, but I really enjoyed it for what it was, especially because I love stealth missions in general. Though, to be fair, this really isn't a complete stealth mission because Part 2 is a guns blazing blast 'em up finale. I didn't feel like the mission was filler, but given the very simple nature of the level, I can understand why some would feel that way. Again, as with Reactor, payload is fine or good, but not great. There's not enough here for me to say it excels at any one thing, but there really isn't anything I didn't like about it either, at least from a gameplay standpoint. There was one thing which irritated me, but more on that when I discuss the story. When I played Modern Warfare 2's campaign in 2022, the one thing that had my blood boiling from how completely pointless its addition ended up being was the crafting aspect. Crafting! Because Call of Duty needed freaking crafting. I could not stand its presence in a Call of Duty game, and I made sure to let all my friends know how stupid I thought it was back then. Fast forward to now, and thank the heavens that Sledgehammer removed any and all crafting elements from Modern Warfare 3. I just couldn't handle it if it had returned. So, to my surprise, I found that there was something else, which got my blood boiling with how irritating it felt to wade through. This stench and rot was the filthy, degenerate, mutant mission known as Deep Cover. The player takes on the role of Laswell to infiltrate a Russian base and reach a contact about some much-needed info that is, later on in the story, not needed at all. This mission's impeccable design has the player walk slowly to avoid getting noticed, walk slowly to avoid getting noticed, walk slowly to avoid getting noticed, take out some random general for his keycard, walk some more, and dive into a closet with a nostalgic cameo appearance from the new version of Yuri, and finally running away from chemical weapon gas to reach a helicopter. All the info which Laswell obtains could have been picked up from a dead drop location off screen and told to the player in a cutscene. There's no gameplay purpose or reason for this mission to exist outside of a cameo from Yuri. There's just no point in this level being here. Yet here we are. So here's to the new crafting type fiasco of 2023's Modern Warfare 3 campaign. We got rid of the craftathon finales, but decided to add a mission about walking and talking to people for 5 minutes. What is this? Halo 5 Guardians? This is one of 2 parts which make up the redesigned No Russian level from the original MW2 in 2009. The other part is sort of another callback to the original, but we'll get back to that shortly. Passenger is the second cutscene level in the game. The player assumes control of a former rebel fighter who was part of Farah's group. She is enjoying her flight when the passenger next to her engages her in a convo and things go south from there. Makarov's men are on the plane and take control, wherein the player is strapped with an explosive vest with a timer on it. When the player first gets held up at gunpoint by the merc sitting next to you, the player has a choice of not engaging or resisting. I initially chose not to resist to see what happened ultimately. The end of the mission is the same, but for about 40 seconds you get to experience something different based off this choice. So, cool, I guess. My main problem with this mission is how I wish it tried to do a little bit more with the concept it presents to the player. The developers could have resurrected some of the Mile High Club mission gameplay from the OG Modern Warfare, but alas, they did not. I'm not sure why they didn't. It couldn't have hurt anything. So for timing's sake, we're going to speed this thing up a bit. Crash Site, a mission that's all about hacking phones the enemy has just left on the ground for us to find. The combat can be fun if maneuvering through the area via stealth, but just running around and shooting your way to the objective is pretty lame. Ultimately, the mission is unremarkable, especially in what could have been a cool callback to the mission where you rescue Nikolai in COD 4. I don't know why it kind of gave me a vibe of that mission, but no, there's not much else of note. Moving on. This is my favorite mission in the game. Flashpoint is effectively the second part of the homage to No Russian. Makarov and his men have infiltrated the Verdansk stadium and are staging a massive attack on the unsuspecting public. The level is a traditional style mission. I actually like the concept of being on the other end of Makarov's horrific massacre, which is the opposite of No Russian. Instead of perpetrating the massacre like in MW2, rest in peace, Private Allen, Rangers lead the way, even in heaven. Players are forced to try and stop it. The whole stadium attack turns out to be a ruse so that Makarov could secretly have his forces attack another location instead. As a whole, I like what's on offer here, and the only thing which seems odd is that Bravo team doesn't kill Makarov and instead tries to take him into custody. I don't know, to me it just felt weird. I'll explain further when I get to the story section of the video. Oligarch is actually not too shabby gameplay-wise. The start with an amphibious approach and working your way up to the top is a lot of fun as you can methodically pick your way through the open environment. The story purpose for coming here is fairly uneventful, but at least the area to explore and engage in combat is unique from the rest of the levels. Overall, the level is a decent amount of fun, but the lackluster finale of the thing and the whole interrogation cutscene made the entirety of the Oligarch mission feel like more of an afterthought. High Rise is a specifically exceptional idea. Perhaps not the best execution across the board, but I was enthralled by this level. I felt like I was playing through a video game version of The Raid Redemption, where I'm working my way through the apartment complex, room by room and floor by floor. I think I spent like an hour and a half just running around the apartments and exploring every single nook and cranny and alternate paths in the towering structure. The goal of the level is to reach the roof and capture Makarov's right-hand guy. Too bad this mission is pointless when he escapes in Season 1 of Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer story. It's almost like it served no actual purpose at all. Thank goodness for the level design. I know people will probably fight me on this and insinuate that it's no big deal or anything. Still, I persist that this is a great level to play through and probably makes the most out of the open combat mission opportunities. This kind of level reminds me of the creative design we used to get in single-player missions. It felt fresh and interesting in a game where not much did. So it's not the best mission in the recent COD games, nor is it the most memorable, but gosh darn it, it was certainly one of the most surprisingly fun missions that I played in this game. Frozen Tundra is a fairly absurd level when you start to think about the plot side of it, but it kind of reminded me of the contingency mission from MW2. It's not as good, but it did remind me of that level. I really like the setup and the structure of it gameplay-wise. It tries to do some cool things with different gameplay arenas. The frozen boat harbor, the forest sniper battle, and the lumberyard are all novel concepts. In totality, I really liked the level, even with the absolutely absurd silliness of a dude being taken out of freezing cold water and escorted without suffering from frostbite or anything. This is where the open combat mission design will either break you or make you very happy. We've seen some reworked areas and remixed slices pulled from Warzone and placed into the campaign at this point, but we haven't seen a level as quickly thrown together as this one. Gordom is, perhaps, one of the most undeservedly fun rush jobs I've ever played. The entire arena is filled with a super fun sandbox of tricks, but the design is so wanting, it's actually scary. The goal of the level is to disarm 3 bombs. That's all they could do at this level. Disarm some devices and walk away. If it weren't for all of the silly stuff I experimented with, I might have been depressed after playing through this mission. This is an average and obviously rushed AC-130 mission. Is it fun? A little bit. Is it pointless since they think they kill Makarov only for him to show up in the next level? Kinda. Is there anything else to say about it? Not really. The final mission in the game, and I must say what an exciting one, at least combat-wise. I thought this mission was great, until I got to the end, and it was over faster than Vin Diesel can say family for the 100th time. I'm not sure what the plan was in having them so poorly send off Soap in an almost desperate attempt to make the ending feel more impactful or resonate more with people. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of killing off characters in the main cast, because I like storytelling that's willing to be bold and take chances like that. And I think the concept of using death to build resonance with the story's themes and tone is a fantastic idea. There's just one problem for MW3. Nothing that has been done up to this point in the narrative has engrossed the player in the story or stakes. Just some build-up, and more build-up, without any payoff. So when I finally get to a moment like this as a player, it just rings hollow and desperate instead of feeling natural. Especially after Farah survives what felt like an obvious setup to sacrifice herself to detonate the missile in the underground facility. If she can get out from that, and Shepard can survive a dive in freezing cold water, why can't Soap survive a subway tunnel shootout? I mean, it's laughable. Soap just decides not to pick up any weapon out of the dozens that were undoubtedly lying on the ground after we just shot the place up and took out like all the Coney mercs in the area. Instead, he just goes up to the evil guy and gets sat down by Makarov like a punk, all for the shock value and forced drama of Soap dying at the end to make the player feel sad. Perhaps it could be, I guess, a motivation tactic to make me want to go after Makarov even more. Like, don't we have enough reasons to dislike and want to get Makarov already? This doesn't make me care any more than I already did. The London Street approach and the tunnel chase with the moving trains were a cool idea, and the mission was a ton of fun. That said, the whole ending leaves a bad taste in the mouth, somewhat tainting a very promising final level for Modern Warfare 3. Why do so many aspects of the story and narrative feel rushed or lacking more polish? Because the game was clearly supposed to be a shorter, more concise DLC, which would probably have served as a bridge to the original vision of whatever Modern Warfare 3 was supposed to look like. Guess what, folks? That didn't happen. In all their wisdom, Activision made the decision to rush out another big Call of Duty release, for the last time they could do so unchallenged by their eventual owners at Microsoft. Sure, it would be easy for me to sit here and say everything you've heard 100 times over, that the game is a lazy, soulless cash grab formed from the bones of other Call of Duty experiences. While some of this might be true to an extent, I'm not willing to sit here and pretend I didn't have a really good time playing through the campaign. I had a great time. I really enjoyed it for what it was. It still was a campaign where it felt like they cut a lot of corners, though. I mean, the narrative was just sort of there as a thread to move the characters along and to keep the open combat missions grounded in the rest of the campaign. I'm not suggesting we simply give Sledgehammer Games a pass for doing this whole open combat thing with Modern Warfare 3's campaign. I am suggesting it's not something that I feel irrevocably detracts from the game, especially when you consider it was stretched from a DLC expansion to a full campaign over the course of a year's time. Nowadays, that's not a lot of time to course correct an entire game, because they had zero time to polish this thing. So yes, this game feels rushed. Yes, this was probably, from Activision's perspective, designed to work as a bundle of modes and content that they could package to sell as a full-price game. Yes, this game is not worth $70. I'm not going to try to convince you that this game is worth $70. If I'm being honest, this game's content should have been maybe $30 to $35 as an expansion at most. This statement alone, I think, really lends to the crux of what has caused an uproar among Call of Duty players who are outraged by what they got for their $70. It's like being a boy named Joshua who saves up his allowance for the whole week so he can go to the ice cream shop and purchase his favorite flavor. Joshua is excited and thrilled to taste that succulent and sweet strawberry ice cream with chunks of real strawberries in it. When the clerk hands him the cone, Joshua discovers the once majestic strawberry flavor has been replaced by the manufacturer with a sloppy substitute. The delectable chunks of real strawberries have been usurped by the cheaper and more cost-effective chunks of whatever the heck Red 40 is in block form. The fresh-tasting chocolate syrup has been vaulted in favor of the economical sludge that saves the company some change just in time for the year's fiscal review. Joshua is noticeably upset because his allowance is now gone for something which pales in comparison to what he received before. I think we're all in agreement here on the value proposition when compared to other Call of Duty titles. I still think there's a fun game buried beneath all the controversy, critique, compromise, cut corners, and completely underwhelming execution based on the expectations for the standards of what a Modern Warfare title should be as a product. Another thing I won't do is sit here and lie to you about my perspective on the game. Can the game be overpriced and can it be disappointing? Yes, it can, and it is. But I'm not going to devalue anything nice or intriguing about this game after I still had a lot of fun playing through it. Let's put it this way. I didn't go in expecting the worst, but I didn't go in expecting the best either. The final product is neither a wretched piece of work nor is it anything resembling an above average effort. It just sort of is what it is. It's a Call of Duty campaign with a few highlight moments that I really liked, a few missions of memorable quality, with many either just okay to below average missions. Many of the missions are only saved because they have the open combat design to fall back on, which turns what would be I believe a boring filler mission into a gameplay sandbox for experimentation. The biggest reason why everything might seem worse than it really is with the campaign would be tied to how plain and forgettable the narrative of the game was. Speaking of story, if you're like me and you still enjoy the overall combat and gameplay of Modern Warfare 3's single-player portion, you will have noticed throughout the campaign how much the narrative impacts the overall atmosphere of each mission, or lack of impact, I suppose. Even if a mission is fun to play through, the objective or plot reason for that mission's existence is often holding back the potential for a cool set piece. Even worse, too often the story itself and the character's poor development fracture what little excitement or momentum there might be. To put it simply, these characters don't feel like they want to be here. This plot feels like it was thrown together in the janitor's closet during a smoke break. The objectives in most of the missions look like they were conceived over think tank sessions in the company mailroom. There is no logical reason for the narrative to be so poorly structured after the way everything was set up in Modern Warfare 2 and even as far back as 2019's Modern Warfare reboot. Speaking about Modern Warfare 2019, the first game in this reboot trilogy set up a really intriguing and more grounded world for the new Modern Warfare universe to begin. It wasn't the most realistic or brutal military shooter ever, but it did a good job of setting the tone for a more mature and visceral take on the franchise. Modern Warfare 2 might have dipped a little too far into the pool of cinematic action preference over a grounded atmosphere, but it still held its own with cool moments between the characters and a few standout set pieces. Man, in 2019, I thought that with this trilogy, we'd be getting some rich, bold, and fresh takes on the classic Modern Warfare universe. I could not have been more wrong. Ultimately, the campaign doesn't build to anything substantial or of a revelatory nature. It simply indicates that Makarov and Price seem incapable of outsmarting each other in this campaign DLC. I meant to say third Modern Warfare campaign, which is so fully fleshed out and deserving to be called a full single-player campaign and absolutely nothing else whatsoever, clearly. As I indicated earlier, the good moments and fun gameplay aspects of the campaign are hindered by the stunningly mediocre narrative. The characters only exacerbate this further when they make seemingly stupid decisions or act out of place with where we know them to be. Price and Gaz literally torture people in the first Modern Warfare game to get information, thereby showing how committed they are to doing what's needed, even if it means getting their hands dirty. Here in MW3's story, Price just gives up politely when questioning Farah about what she was doing, dealing with Shadow Company and Shepard, the people who actually tried to kill Price, and Task Force 141. Are her allies? What the heck? Yes, I'm aware this was established in the multiplayer story for MW2, but but it's still dumb. Think about how much better the character's conflict would have been if this was an after-mission cutscene and Farah and Price would have come to blows about her aligning herself with Price's betrayer. Think of the rift that could have driven between Price and Farah's friendship. Think of the potential for the drama of Farah keeping this secret from Price to spill over into the next game. A lingering presence of distrust between the two until the moment called for them to reconcile. Instead, Price just values her friendship so much that he waives all resemblance of who he was in the first game to seemingly go along to get along. Like the same dude who will do whatever it takes to get his hands dirty for all the information he can get randomly decides he won't press for intel or try to coax the truth out of Farah. Why? Because Price and Farah are the bestest buds in the whole wide world, and hurting her feelings might be worse than learning valuable information about General Shepard and Graves? The writing in this scene is so not good. Then at the end of the mission, they tease Farah's pending death when she stays behind to contain the missile, but they can't bring themselves to follow through, so whatever. There's no stakes to the plot at all. Also, when they show the flashback of Price and Soap tracking down Makarov, they are literally killing tons of Makarov's mercs and henchmen. But when they have Makarov in custody, suddenly then, killing the enemy is bad and morally wrong. So, yeah. Shockingly, there is a narrative facepalm moment so absurdly silly, it made me consider apologizing to The Last of Us Part 2 for how much I made fun of the scene where Tommy and Jesse just show up right after Ellie kills Mel and Owen. See, that scene was ridiculous because Ellie left at the same time as Jesse, so how would he be able to find Tommy and get back over to the marina like 5 to 10 minutes after Ellie got there? Mathematically and logistically, it doesn't make sense. Don't worry though, Modern Warfare 3 looked at that scene and said, "Hey Neil, hold my beer." About midway through Modern Warfare 3's narrative, Price, Laswell, and the rest of the Brady Bunch contact and strike an agreement with General Shepard. In the scene, Graves is pictured right next to the disgraced general. He's right there! So someone explained to me how the leader of Shadow Company and all the security available for Shepard from the hired mercs allowed him to be captured by Makarov's Coney forces. The game doesn't bother explaining why, as the narrative just skips to him being captured and not so much as a word from Graves about it at all. How and when did this happen? The world may never know. I guess Tommy and Jesse are gonna have to invest in some new teleporting tech to compete with the likes of General Shepard. Well, Tommy will. Sad face. The writing just feels so rushed. Almost like they just wrote a first draft and went from there because they didn't have time to develop anything further. Even with Soap's death in the third act of the original Modern Warfare 3, I never felt great about it. As Soap was the character I played, I felt an emotional investment in Soap's existence. But not only does that game give us an opportunity to grieve, it gave us a shot at revenge too. The ending of MW3 in 2023 feels kind of pointless. You're able to stop Makarov and Coney from detonating explosive in the subway system, but Soap is killed by Makarov, and the whole thing is over and done with faster than you can say, setting up a sequel. Makarov travels all the way to where you are just to shoot Soap and immediately leaves. Like, he just leaves. There's no time to grieve and zero time for revenge, because that's gonna be in another game, I guess. The gameplay is fun and the missions are adequate for my enjoyment, but the story is a big letdown from the heights I thought this reboot could reach by the time we got here in the third one. There was enough potential on the horizon that I believed Modern Warfare 3 would be something really cool. Look, I'll say it, I really enjoy playing the MWZ zombie mode with friends. I even enjoy some of the multiplayer modes and returning maps. I found more to like in the campaign than I would have thought possible given the rushed nature of the game. However, none of this excuses what was a terrible choice by Activision with some poor execution with the time they were given by Sledgehammer Games. This game's campaign could have been so much more, but it is only ever going to be remembered for how disappointing it was for the COD community at large. If you remember, during the nearly 2 years of legal battles, it kept Microsoft from completing the acquisition and assuming control of the gaming production and publication of Activision Blizzard titles. Therefore, I'm sure it was good old Bobby and his leadership team that called for the MW3 development to be fast-tracked to sneak it in toward the end of the fiscal year. If you look at how many Activision Blizzard releases there were in 2023, it becomes pretty clear. For 2023, the company released Crash Team Rumble, Warcraft Rumble, Diablo 4, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Essentially, without a Call of Duty release this year, the company would have had no major release for the holiday season or the fourth fiscal quarter. Turns out, it doesn't take the most powerful development blunders in the world to create the next fumbled game launch. All it takes is the will of a single man. Thank you for watching the video to the end. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, I ask that you would consider subscribing, clicking that like button, hitting that little bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any new videos as soon as they drop. Thanks again, and have yourself a great day.
Insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over again, expecting to change. That is crazy.
We need to keep moving.
Left your secrets
What?
inside, all the lies you can't hide. It's a dangerous game. Stop.
But then, of course, African swallows are non-migratory. Oh, yeah.
Play with fire. It's a dangerous game. I see a storm rolling in. I see the ground crumbling, caught in a chain reaction. I see the dark coming in. I see a
Well, now, that's not fair. Your mother's made mistakes, but she's here now. That's got to count for something.
Shut up, Frank.
It's a dangerous
This isn't about you. This is about you. This is about what you didn't do. It's about what I did.
It's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous It's a dangerous game.
That's good, man. That's good. So, I gotta ask you something.
What?
The video that you made.
That was no message. This is a